All right, so today's video is going to be normal millennial STEAM video. I'm going to be talking about how I thought about this, and I've thought about it throughout my entire life. What it must feel like to be rich while staring at your poor employees. And that's what I felt this morning. I was looking at me and Gen Z sitting on one side of the office and the boss sitting on the other side, who's independently wealthy, right? His probably his annual income, I would say, gets close to $1 million a year between his regular job and all of his investments. And how you can't sympathize with people who you claim that you're self-made, right? And most people who are self-made, maybe there are a few out there, but I think a lot of it has to do with the money that's coming in order to be able to create a foundation for you. Because a lot of us who come into this world without the foundation, without wealth from the previous generation, and we have to start at the bottom, it really becomes nearly impossible to restart every generation. Like if I were to have kids and they were going to start out, they would probably end up poor because their father isn't going to leave them any money whatsoever. In fact, even though I haven't seen anyone in my family in more than 30 years, I think it's been, I was always wondered if maybe someday I'll wake up one morning and there'll be like this huge inheritance from a relative that I've never heard of. And I will just get a letter from a lawyer saying, hey, you've inherited this much money and this is how you pick it up. And that's how I would end my life. I'd spend it traveling the world for until I ran out of money. But since that's never going to happen because I've been an orphan since I was a teenager, I have to think about what's going to happen to me, and nothing good is going to happen to me. So far, I haven't heard any sort of repercussions from my job yet. Like my boss hasn't said anything to me since I got in trouble last Tuesday. He just sits there and stares at me. I think, as he said to me before, his hands are tied unless they're working behind the scenes on getting rid of me. And when I'm still in shock that they got rid of a person that had been there for 15 years without any prior notice. She just came into work one day and didn't realize that it was her last day at work, and that's going to be the way that I'm going to go out too. And today I was talking to the school president about it, and he made the little zipper thing across his mouth, and he said, "Millennial Steam, I'm not allowed to talk about that." And I'm like, Jesus. He also offered to give me a job reference as well, if I needed it, which is really nice because otherwise I wouldn't have any references. So I at least have one reference because I was going to leave this job with no references whatsoever. But with that said, let's get into the main topic of today's video, which is going to revolve around work. So someone left a comment, I believe last night after I posted my video, and it was very insightful. So I decided to grab the whole comment, stick it into Chat GPT, generate a script, and then create 3 talking points from that script. And that's typically how I make all my videos. So let's get into our first talking point. So today I'm not going to be reading whole paragraphs. Today I'm just going to be reacting to some of the sentences, like 1, 2 sentences, and 1 sentence there. So first talking point is, how are people supposed to gain experience if entry-level positions are no longer beginner friendly? Well, that's the big thing right now, is that they're taking what would have been considered a good job, a job that paid over $100,000 a year, and they're breaking it up so they don't have to pay that much money. So when you have a job that's that expensive, that person is expensive, right? They're going to want vacation, benefits, and a high salary. So when you chop up that job, you're going to turn it into part-time, low pay, but you still need the experience. And that's what's going to keep people out of those entry level jobs, is that pillar of experience that they expect you to have when you were going to take a position that was held by someone making a six-figure salary. And this is a great way for corporate America in order to make more money. They chop up those big jobs. They stick 5 to 10 years worth of experience onto the job description, and then they wait for someone who's desperate enough to take that job. Because you and I may not believe what people are willing to take money wise when they get down to the nitty gritty of how much they need money. So even a person with a master's degree, because my boss refused to believe me that I knew someone who had a master's degree that was working 3 jobs and still living at home. Like this misconception of older people, because I'm pretty sure he's a boomer, that just because you have a college degree that instantly you're just going to grab the world by the tail and be able to twirl it over your head. I assure you, I had to have that reality, that that shock, that life shock when I finished school in 2017. When I finally finished all of my 4 degrees and I went to go look for work, and all I could find was working at Walmart. Because remember, after I got out of college, there was no job for me. The jobs that I've had after college have been Walmart, have been a call center, and then unemployed for nearly 3 years while I looked for this job. So as you can see, I haven't had a glamorous career, and I would consider myself to be an educated person. But when I look at jobs, when I look at the job boards and I see the extremely low skilled jobs that pay nothing, and then you have the extreme jobs where they want you to have a master's degree and 5 to 10 years of experience and they want to pay you $10 an hour, they're waiting for the right person. Because corporate America doesn't want to hire people who are overqualified. They would much rather hire a person that's underqualified and then work them to into the ground. And I've seen this happen in so many different jobs where they're constantly posting the same job. You look at the pay, you look at the requirements, you scratch your head and you wonder who would even apply to that. But eventually every job finds a person, finds a village idiot, and they'll take them and burn them out and then find the next guy. Because there's always going to be a next guy when you have tens of millions of people looking for any job. Talking point number two, internships often the only way to gain experience for these jobs are frequently unpaid or low paying, making them inaccessible for those who can't afford to work for free. And that's why I tell people in college, make sure that while you're going to school that you get the experience that you need, because typically if you're in school you're not going to be working as much as once you get out of school. So I tell people your experience while you're in college is going to guarantee that you're going to get a job after college. If you wait to finish your degree and then go out and look for experience, it's not going to work out for you. My original Gen Z came from a very wealthy family. So he had the ability to take a year off from life, live at home, work an internship, and at the end of the internship, he got fired. Why? Because he wasn't going to be a good worker. And sometimes, my next talking point is going to talk about this, but sometimes you just don't get what you want. And it means that individuals with financial support can gain the experience they need, widening the economic gap created in a cycle of inequality. And this is the difference. He had rich parents, he could live at home, he could use his resources in order to be able to spend time gaining experience. But even as an intern, they want you actually working in the industry for 5 to 10 years. And you're just like, well, when am I going to have time to work a job for 5 to 10 years just to get a slightly better job? And that's the ridiculous aspect of 5 to 10 years of experience. It's like your overall quality of life between a $10, a $15 and a $20 an hour job is not much. It may seem like what I make now, it seemed like such a lot of money 3 years ago. But today, I went to go take one of my coworkers out to lunch, and I didn't buy him anything fancy. I bought him some ramen today, and my card came back declined. I was so embarrassed in that restaurant. He just looked at me like, "You took me out to lunch, Millennial Steam, and now you can't afford to pay?" I was like, "Oh my God, what happened? I just had money in my account yesterday." Well, this is what happens when you set your bills on auto bill pay. Sometimes it's not convenient when they auto bill pay you. Like today, I had no idea. I thought rent would come out on the first. Everyone pays rent on the first, but on today they pulled the rent out a day early on me, and I'm like, oh crap. So it took everything out of my bank account, but at least my rent's paid. Like, my next paycheck at least is just going to be all for me. But that happened today, and it was just like my coworker just was staring. I remember him looking at me and me looking at the cashier like I could have sworn I had money this morning. And I even showed him on my phone. It's like, hey man, I didn't mean to, to ask you out to lunch and then not be able to pay because he really helped me out today with a cleanup project. And I was like, what I really needed is his pickup truck because I can't put anything into my tiny little wagon car. None of the big stuff would have fit in the back of my car. And it would have been very uncomfortable to get all that stuff out. But anyhow, that happened today. So, all right, so let's move on to talking point number three, the career ladder illusion. So, unrelated work experience doesn't qualify them for the jobs. This is the problem I've had throughout my entire life. I've worked at entry level jobs in warehouse, retail, restaurant, you name it. Unrelated work experience shouldn't even go on your resume. Like when I post my resume, it doesn't have when I was working at a restaurant or when I was unemployed. Having to talk away all of those years in my life in which I didn't have a job because I couldn't find one. Luckily, I've been going to school long enough so I could always say, hey, I was a full time student. That's why I didn't have a job. The reality was I just couldn't find a job. During the pandemic, you got kind of like a free pass for not having a job for a few years. But any regular employer right now who's going to look at that is going to say, you know what? Why aren't you working during this time? What happened in your life that you couldn't get a job? And the last thing they want to hear is you couldn't find one. Because if you couldn't find one, that means that you're not that great at what you do. Because if you're good at your job, you're going to find a job. But if you're not good at your job, like my current Gen Zero, like he's worked nothing but entry level minimum wage work from restaurant to drive through liquor store. He's had the worst jobs. And so you can't put that on a resume. So when you show up at a real job that requires experience, they want to see those 5 to 10 years of experience. They don't want to see on your resume that you were washing cars because you were waiting to find a job. So my resume looks terrible. And that's one of the main reasons why I have such a hard time finding employment is I don't have any references because I always get, canned at work for performance. And I never have the ability to stay in a job long because let's face it, I don't like working. And I don't know too many people who do like working. In fact, I absolutely despise going to work. I hate the moment I wake up and I know I have to go to work. I think about paying my rent. I think about being able to afford to eat. I think about having money to help other people out. I, I think about all of these things, but the reality is I don't like working. And the fact is that it's not like I don't like hard work. I'm a bodybuilder. I work out in the gym every single day and I look like it. When you look at me in the store, I mean, you just like I remember at the Kroger's across the street, they used to have this woman there. I don't know how long she's been gone. I think right around the pandemic, she decided that she was going to quit the industry after working in a grocery store for 25 years. the pandemic broke her and she went to go do something else. Anyhow, we never talked to each other in the grocery store for the 8 years that she worked across the street from my house. And the reason she said she never talked to me because she's like, "You're that really buff guy that comes in here," and I was like, "What?" She's like, she broke me down to a stereotype. She's like, "You're a meathead, so that's why I didn't talk to you." And so once she found out who I was, and in the early days of Millennial Sting, I had a podcast on Anchor, and she got to hear some of my podcasts, and she really liked the message from this channel that we're all screwed. We're not getting ahead, and no matter what we do, we can't quit this job. And one of the worst things I ever said to her, one of the most offensive things I ever said to her was, "There's no way I would work this job in this Kroger's," even though I told her I had worked at a previous Kroger's right up the street for about 11 months. But she was so offended that people didn't consider the kind of work that she did dignified. Because in America, if you're wearing a name tag and you're wearing a uniform, it signifies one thing: that you're poor and looking poor, feeling poor, and being miserable in poverty is something that we have to learn to get used to. Because the vast majority of people in America don't amount to anything, and those numbers are going up every single day as they get rid of more and more good jobs. Because the good job, any person that's been on Indeed without the right education and experience will tell you, if you've spent your whole life doing unrelated work, it's like having a degree in, I don't, in communication and wanting to apply to a job as an engineer. So you've been working, let's say, at Wendy's, McDonald's, and Burger King with your communication degree, and there's a job you really want, right? Right? It's some sort of upper level management position, and you just keep wondering why you're not getting that job. And then your employer asks you, like, what kind of work have you been doing for the past 5 years? Well, if you're going to say to them, "I finished my degree 5 years ago and then I went to go work at McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's," they're just going to be like, "Sorry, you're not qualified to do this job." And you're like, "Well, how am I supposed to get a good job if they won't let me get the related work experience that you need?" So this sets up people in low-paying positions longer, preventing upward mobility and keeping true entry to higher-paying careers out of reach. That's exactly what America's become. Higher level careers are out of reach for the regular proletariat man or woman. That's why a lot of people will stay in that sub $20 price range for the rest of their life. Because how are you supposed to get out of these positions if those careers are out of reach? If your unrelated work experience isn't going to allow you to get to the job that you want, how are you supposed to get there? And the fact is that you know you're not supposed to get there. Because if I've said this once, I've said it a million times. If it's anything important, they will not let the proletariat touch it. Just like I've always said about voting. Voting doesn't matter whether we have the left or the right in the White House after next week, in a few days. It doesn't matter to the average pro because there are corporate Democrats and there are corporate Republicans. Neither of them care about the well being of poor people because if they cared, they would have made a difference by now. Look at how advanced our civilization is, and we have hundreds of thousands of homeless people living all along the western part of the United States because it doesn't get as cold there in California, or else you're going to have homeless popsicles. But look at the problems our society has, the systemic problems that we have with getting people into good paying jobs. And you'll see that the opportunity to leave low paying jobs is blocked at every possible angle because the proletariat doesn't have access to the things that it needs. And getting lucky. Remember, millions upon millions of people play the lottery every single week and none of them win. And that's how life is. We're not winning at life. In fact, we're going in the opposite direction of winning at life. Everyone that's not rich is an American loser.